He looked at me like he already knew the answer, and that terrified me more than anything. The kind of look that doesn't ask a question because it already sees the truth. You ever had someone look at you like that? Like they've peeled you open without saying a word? It was raining that night. Not the gentle, romantic kind of rain you read about in books. No, this was the kind that slapped against the windows and rattled the old glass panes, like it was trying to break in. Like it knew something was about to happen. I was sitting at the kitchen table, wrapped in one of those old knit cardigans that always smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. The wine glass in front of me was half full or half empty, depending on how honest you want to be with yourself. My fingers were trembling, and I didn't even realize it until I saw the rim of the glass vibrating. That sound. The tiniest clink. But in that silence, it echoed like a scream. And then, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. Coming down the hallway. Not my husband. He was upstairs, probably already asleep or pretending to be. He hadn't touched me in months, hadn't looked at me like a woman in even longer. No, this was him. I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. My whole body already knew who it was. My chest tightened, my breathing hitched. And then I said it, barely above a whisper, "You shouldn't be here." I wanted those words to be enough. I wanted them to carry weight, to push him back, to fix the thing inside me that had already cracked wide open. But then he answered, low, calm, unshaken. "Then why haven't you told me to leave?" God. You ever been in a moment that makes your skin feel too tight? Like your body is suddenly too small to hold everything you're feeling? That was me. Sitting there, 56 years old. Married. A mother. A woman who had done everything right for most of her life. Who kept things neat. Who smiled when she didn't feel like it. Who packed lunches and booked dentist appointments and folded socks in perfect pairs. And yet, here I was, trembling over a glass of wine, heart slamming against my ribs because a 19-year-old boy had just asked me the one question I didn't have the strength to answer. Why haven't I told him to leave? Because somewhere deep down, in a place I was too ashamed to admit existed, I didn't want him to. And that scared the hell out of me. I know what you're thinking. What is a woman my age even doing in a situation like this? But that's the thing. These stories, they don't start with sex. They start with silence. With the long pauses between words. With glances that last just a little too long. With a laugh that makes you feel seen again. They start when you're lonely in your own house. When your reflection starts to look like someone else's mother instead of the woman you used to be. When someone comes along, someone younger, bolder, with eyes that don't carry the years, and he doesn't just see you, he notices you. He pays attention in the quietest, most dangerous ways. And that's where it all began. Right there in my dim kitchen with the storm howling outside, and a boy I had no business feeling drawn to standing just a few feet away. I wish I could tell you I stopped it there. That I found my strength. That I sent him home. But if I did that, I wouldn't be telling you this story. Before we begin, if you've ever felt torn between what's right and what makes you feel alive, if you've ever looked in the mirror and questioned who you really are, then this story might feel a little too familiar. Welcome back to Passionate Tales Unfold. The air always felt heavier after 5 p.m. Not heavy like a storm, not the kind that threatens or screams, but the kind that settles. Quiet. Dense. Familiar. My house would turn gold around that hour, every evening. The sun would stretch its last fingers across the wood-paneled walls and slip through the lace curtains like it belonged there. I used to love that time of day. I used to stop and watch it. Now that light reminded me of him. It reminded me of what it felt like to be seen, again. Really seen. I live in a house that creaks when no one moves. The floors are real oak, built long before any of us lived here, and they still carry the weight of every step that's ever crossed them. You can't sneak in or out of my house. It listens too closely. The wallpaper in the dining room is faded now, little blue flowers that once bloomed proudly. There's a crack in the corner of the ceiling I've been meaning to patch for months, but somehow never do. Every room has the kind of beauty that doesn't ask for attention, antique, aging, stubborn in its charm. That evening, the dining table was set. Vanilla candles flickered near the centerpiece, their scent soft but unmistakable. The kind of smell that tries to make everything feel warmer than it is. Plates were placed with care. Wine glasses shimmered under the golden light, even if most of them would go untouched. I'd cooked everything myself. Roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, my son's favorite green beans with almonds, even though he never eats the almonds. It felt like the kind of night that needed tradition, something steady to hold on to. It was a farewell dinner. My son, Daniel, was heading to college the next morning. He sat across from me, laughing between bites, his voice still filled with that buzzing, impatient energy that only belongs to people who haven't had their hearts broken yet. He looked so young, so ready, so unaware of everything time would eventually take from him. Next to him sat his friend, Liam, 19. Quiet, too observant for someone his age. He wasn't the kind of boy who filled a room. No, Liam did something worse. He lingered in it. His presence stayed long after he was gone, like perfume on a sweater or a melody that catches you off guard. I remember the first time I met him, months before that night. Polite, respectful, a little shy. But his eyes, those eyes didn't match the rest of him. They held something older. Unknowing. That evening, Liam wasn't talking much. Just listening, watching. He wore a dark green sweater that clung to his frame in that way that made you notice the way he breathed. His hair was still a little damp from the shower. And when he reached for the bread, his fingers brushed the tablecloth so gently, it was like he didn't want to disturb the fabric. My husband sat at the head of the table, just like he always did. Fork in one hand, phone in the other. Smiling when appropriate, nodding at the right moments. He hadn't asked me how I was in weeks. Months, maybe. We hadn't touched, not really, in a long time. You can live with someone and still feel like a stranger. You can share a bed and feel more alone than you ever have. That night, as they all talked about school, dorm life, professors, the price of textbooks, I sat there and smiled. I laughed when I should. I passed the potatoes. I poured the wine. But inside, I was floating, hovering just above myself, watching it all unfold like a movie I already knew the ending to. The candlelight danced on Liam's face when he looked up from his plate. Just for a moment. A second. His eyes met mine. And that look, it didn't belong to a dinner table. It didn't belong to a friend of my son's. It didn't belong anywhere near the life I had built for myself. But it was there. And it lingered. He didn't smile. He didn't flinch. He just held my gaze. And I should have looked away. I should have. But I didn't. Because in that moment, for the first time in what felt like years, I felt something. Not comfort. Not safety. Not obligation. Something dangerous. Something forbidden. And it didn't ask for permission. It just bloomed. My sweater felt too warm suddenly, even though the room was cool. I rubbed at my elbows without thinking. The edges were worn, frayed. Like me. The chandelier overhead cast soft, oval shadows on the walls. Dust floated through the beams of light like snowflakes that had nowhere to land. The air smelled like roasted garlic and old wood. I watched my husband sip his wine without tasting it. I watched my son swipe through his phone while he talked. And then I looked back at Liam. He was still watching me. Not like a boy. Not like a guest. Like a man who knew. That was the first moment I felt invisible and exposed at the same time. That night, the house was quiet after they went upstairs. My son and Liam had taken their bags to the guest room. My husband had gone to bed early, mumbling something about a meeting in the morning. I stayed downstairs. Alone. The gold light had vanished by then. The house had turned blue, and then gray, and then black. The candles had burned low. And I sat in the silence. waiting for something I wasn't even sure would happen. Not yet, but soon, because something had already shifted. Something had already been invited in, and I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know if I wanted to. After dinner, the house thinned out the way it always does after goodbyes pretend to be light. Daniel excused himself first. Said he had to finish packing, double-check his charger, or something like that. I don't even remember. His voice was fading into another season of his life, and I was trying to smile like I wasn't already mourning him. My husband stepped outside, phone pressed to his ear before he even shut the door. Just one quick call, he mumbled to no one in particular. And suddenly, the kitchen felt too still. Liam stood at the sink, rinsing plates he hadn't dirted, loading dishes that weren't his. I watched his fingers glide across the ceramic, slow and careful. Like everything he did was deliberate. Like he understood that quiet could speak just as loudly as noise. I stayed by the doorway. Didn't offer help. Didn't move. There was a hum from the refrigerator. A soft clink as he set a fork in the rack. My wine glass still sat on the edge of the counter, half full, forgotten. The scent of roasted garlic lingered in the air, mingling with soap and the distant smell of rain beginning to tease the window panes. Then, without looking at me, he said it. "Want to show me the garden before I leave?" I blinked. Just once. As if that would erase the words from the air. My heart stuttered. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt so normal. So casual. Like any mother could walk a 19-year-old boy through her backyard without it meaning anything at all. It's harmless, I told myself. Of course it is. The garden's just outside. It's 10 steps from the back door. I nodded. Didn't say yes. Just nodded. He wiped his hands on a towel and followed me. Quietly. No fanfare. No flirtation. But I noticed how close he stood. How I could feel the warmth of him without turning around. How his footsteps didn't try to fill the silence the way other boys his age did. He didn't crack a joke. Didn't make small talk. He just walked behind me. And that somehow felt louder than words. The back door opened with a creak I'd always meant to fix. The kind of sound that usually annoyed me, but this time it felt like a warning. Like something old was protesting what was about to happen. The air outside was damp. Earthy. The rain hadn't started yet, but it was close. You could smell it in the soil, thick with memory. My garden wasn't much, a stone path winding between patches of hydrangeas and lavender. A bench under the sycamore tree. Wind chimes near the shed that only sang when no one was listening. I walked a few steps ahead of him. My sweater clung to me a little tighter in the breeze. I crossed my arms, suddenly aware of how thin the fabric was. The ground was soft underfoot, and the moon hadn't risen yet, so everything was that deep, purplish gray that makes edges blur. I stopped near the bench, pointed to the jasmine climbing the trellis, said something about how it only blooms in early summer. He stood next to me, not behind, not in front, right next to me. Close enough that I could hear his breath, slow and measured. Close enough that I could feel him without touching. And still, he didn't speak. Neither did I. Because what was there to say? I wasn't thinking about the garden. Not really. I was thinking about how I could feel every inch of my skin. How it was waking up in places I didn't know had gone numb. I told myself again, it's nothing. He's just being polite. Just curious. But even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't true. Because when I turned my head just slightly, his eyes were already waiting, not watching, waiting, and there was nothing polite in the way that silence settled between us. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't awkward. It was charged, like the air right before a storm, like the moment before a match touches the wick. And I should have gone inside. I should have walked back into the kitchen, back into my routine, back into the version of me that knew better. But I didn't move. Not because I was frozen, but because part of me didn't want the moment to end. Because standing next to Liam in that quiet garden, with the smell of jasmine and the whisper of rain. I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel tired or old or forgotten. I felt alive and terrified of what that meant. The air outside smelled like rosemary and earth, and something else I couldn't name. Something warm barely there. Like the ghost of old perfume trapped in the folds of a memory. Or the hum of a moment you don't realize is important until it's too late. I led him down the stone path, barely lit by the small solar lights I'd tucked into the ground years ago, long before I ever imagined they'd illuminate anything but flowers. They cast a soft glow along the edges of the grass, making everything look like it had been dipped in silver. The crickets were loud tonight. Not obnoxious. Just present. Filling the empty spaces that I didn't dare speak into. The mist in the air was thin, almost romantic. The kind that settles in your hair, in your lashes. Makes your skin feel touched without being touched at all. He followed me. His footsteps deliberate. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Just there. Right behind me. And that distance between us, those 2 or 3 steps. It felt loaded. Like it was asking a question I didn't know how to answer. I adjusted the hem of my sweater. Ran a hand through my hair, even though there was nothing to fix. I felt suddenly aware of my body in ways I hadn't in years. The arch of my back. The way my hips moved. How my breath caught in my throat every time I heard him step closer. I pointed to the herb bed by the corner. That's lavender. I think, I said, laughing lightly. But it wasn't lavender. I knew it wasn't. I just forgot the name, because he was watching me, not the plants. I could feel it. He wasn't here to learn about thyme and jasmine and soil pH levels. He was looking at me, and not in the way men my age did. Not like I was fading or surviving or past some invisible line. No. Liam looked at me like I was undiscovered. Like I was something unread. And God help me, I liked it. I pointed out the rose bush next. Said something about how it hadn't bloomed since last summer. But my voice was thinner than usual. Not shaky, just diluted. Like I was trying to distract myself from the fact that his eyes hadn't moved off me once. I walked toward the back corner of the garden where the wooden swing hung under the old sycamore tree. The rope creaked gently in the wind. I used to sit there when Daniel was a baby, I said. He didn't respond. Just followed. Close enough now that I could hear his breath. Slow. Measured. I turned to face him then. Just for a second. And the moonlight. God, the moonlight. It caught the side of his face like a painting. Like someone had carved him out of that cool night just to test me. I meant to look away. But I didn't. Because something in his expression stopped me. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't flirting. He was studying me. And not the version of me I put out at dinner. Not the polite hostess. Not the wife who laughed on cue. He was looking at the quiet, unseen parts. The tiredness around my eyes. The soft line of my neck. The fingers that still carried flour from the pie crust I rolled that afternoon. And it hit me. I hadn't felt observed like that in years. Not since before the forgetting began. Not since the days when my husband touched my back in passing just because. Or when I'd find my reflection in the mirror and smile without adjusting the light. That kind of looking, it doesn't happen often. Not when you get older. Not when people start to see you as settled. But Liam was looking like he had questions. Like I was still a possibility. I exhaled slowly, not to calm myself, but to feel something, because my skin was alive again. My thoughts unruly, and my heart, it was pulsing like it remembered something my mind wasn't ready to name. I sat down on the edge of the swing. Not far, just enough to let the rope hold my weight. He stood in front of me, not looming, just waiting, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly curved, as if he knew that this was the moment everything shifted. And he wasn't wrong, because something in me tilted, not broken, not shattered, just tilted. The axis of who I was and who I had once been leaned just slightly toward the unknown. and I wasn't scared. Not yet. Not fully. I just felt the edge of something. Sharp and soft at the same time. Like heat. Or hunger. Or the memory of a version of myself I thought had died quietly in the corners of this garden. But she was here now. And she was watching him back. I was mid-sentence. Talking about something forgettable, the shape of the fig tree, or how the garden flooded last spring when I saw him. My husband. His face in the reflection of the kitchen window. Backlit by the chandelier, phone pressed to his ear. Smiling. Probably talking to his business partner. Or his assistant. Or the woman who texted at odd hours lately, whose name he never said out loud, but always said too casually when I asked. I froze. My voice didn't crack, but something inside me did. Just a hairline fracture. Just enough. He didn't see me. Didn't see us. He turned, walked out of frame, out of sight, still talking, still smiling. And that was it. That was the whole moment. But I felt like I'd been caught doing something wrong, even though I hadn't moved. Even though I hadn't said a thing. Liam noticed the shift in me. I didn't look at him, but I felt it, his stillness. The way the energy between us changed, thickened like the air right before a summer storm. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just said, "Are you happy?" And everything in me stopped. That question. It didn't belong there. Not in a garden at night. Not from a boy I barely knew. Not with my husband's shadow still cooling the glass behind us. But it was there. Hanging. Soft. Unapologetic. I laughed. A reflex. Too quick. Too high. Happy? I repeated, letting the word wobble in the space between us. He didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. I didn't answer. I think I shook my head. Or maybe I didn't move at all. The silence stretched. And not the uncomfortable kind. Not the kind that demands to be filled. This silence had weight. It had meaning. It felt like truth without words. A breeze swept through the garden just then, quick and sudden, like it had been waiting for that exact beat. It caught the edge of my cardigan and peeled it off one shoulder, like fingers brushing skin by accident. Or maybe not by accident at all. I started to pull it back. But he was already moving. Slow. Gentle. He reached forward, not rushed, not hesitant, and lifted the fabric. And when he laid it back onto my shoulder, his fingertips grazed my collarbone. It was nothing. It was everything. The kind of touch you'd forget if you didn't feel it all the way in your spine. The kind of moment you tell yourself not to read into until it won't stop reading itself into you. He didn't move away right away. He lingered. Not close enough to be wrong. Not far enough to be forgettable. I could smell the faintest trace of his skin. That impossible mix of youth and warmth and something I couldn't name because I hadn't let myself name things like that in too long. I didn't look at him, but I felt him watching me again. Not my face. Not my sweater. But the way my throat tightened when I swallowed. The way my fingers clenched the edge of the swing like I needed something to hold onto, just to keep from floating off. There was a question between us now. Not spoken. Not even shaped. But it hovered. Right there. In the inches of space that could tip either way. I thought about how close the kitchen was. How, if my husband turned around, he might see. But see what, exactly? A swing. A cardigan. A pause too long to explain. And suddenly, I felt angry. Not at Liam. Not at myself, even. But at the quietness of it all. How so many years had passed in that same quiet. With me doing the right thing. The expected thing. The invisible thing. And now here I was. Fully seen. By someone who wasn't supposed to matter. By someone who shouldn't even know how to ask if I was happy. But he had. And I couldn't lie. Not with my words. Not with my body. I shifted slightly on the swing. Not away. Just enough to feel the air move between us again. Enough to let the silence settle and stay. We didn't say anything for a long time after that. The swing creaked once beneath me, and then we were just still. Like the garden had swallowed its own breath. But the quiet started to feel too loud, too dangerous. So I stood. Said something meaningless, like, let's go back in, like we hadn't just been standing on the edge of a cliff we didn't name. He followed. And for the first time, I felt him behind me, not just following me, but watching how I moved. The way my fingers slid over the back door handle. The way I hesitated before opening it. Inside, the air felt too warm. Too close. My pulse quickened with the change. I walked straight to the kitchen, to the kettle. Out of habit. Or nerves. Or the need to do something with my hands. Tea? I offered, my voice a notch too high, too casual. He shook his head. Too late for that, he said. He didn't mean the hour. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, elbows on the wood, his sleeves pushed up, arms lean and folded. He looked young. And not young at all. I stayed standing because sitting across from him felt too intimate, but I could feel the shift. The way he held the silence now, it was deliberate. Patient. Not like a boy unsure of himself, but like someone who already knew the answer and was just waiting for me to stop pretending. My sweater was still loose on one shoulder. I pulled it tighter. His eyes followed that motion, but not with hunger, not yet. With something softer, something deeper, and that unnerved me more than anything else. He didn't ask permission. He didn't lean forward. He just watched me. Like I was the one in charge here, but somehow I didn't feel like it. And then, finally, his voice low. Quiet. You can still tell me to stop. My breath caught. There was nothing to stop. Not really. Not yet. We hadn't touched. We hadn't said it out loud. But I knew what he meant. He wasn't just talking about the tea. Or the night. He meant the way I looked at him in the garden. He meant the way I didn't flinch when he touched me. He meant the storm that had been quietly brewing under my skin for longer than I cared to admit. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't about Liam. It was about me. It was about what I'd buried. What I'd silenced. What I'd let slip through the cracks for years, piece by piece, until all that was left of me was a routine wrapped in aging skin and soft cardigans and carefully measured smiles. I didn't say yes. I didn't say anything like that. I looked at him. And then I said, softly, carefully, with a half-laugh that felt like both a warning and a whisper of surrender. You should go. But my hand didn't point to the door. My eyes didn't move from his. And my feet didn't step back. He didn't move either. He just sat there, watching me. And I realized I hadn't meant it, not really. You should go, I had said. But what I meant was, I can't be the one to decide. Not tonight. And in the way he stayed perfectly still, without pushing, without asking again, I knew he understood. He was giving me space. Not just physical. Emotional. He wasn't chasing. He wasn't cornering. He was letting me stand in the middle of my own longing and decide if I could bear to stay there. The clock ticked behind us, faint and rhythmic. A car passed outside, headlights flickering briefly across the wall. And the air between us felt like a single thread. If either of us moved, it would snap. But still, neither of us moved. Because sometimes, stillness is a choice. A loud, trembling, aching choice. For oh, he touched my wrist like it might disappear. Like even the smallest part of me was worth holding onto before it slipped through the night. His fingers weren't firm, just present. Gentle in a way that made me forget how long it had been since someone touched me like I was made of something tender. And still, I didn't pull away. I think I stared at the spot where our skin met, as if that simple contact had rewired everything I knew about the world. My breathing shallow, uneven. Like I had to remind myself how lungs worked when someone was looking at you like that. He didn't say a word. He just held my wrist with that soft, unbearable care, and then, slowly, his thumb brushed the inside of it. Once, that one small movement, barely there, felt louder than anything that had happened all night. And still, I said nothing. We just sat like that for a moment that didn't belong to time. Not young, not old, not wrong, not right. Just two people suspended in a silence they both recognized but couldn't explain. Then, so slowly it was like watching a thought form in real time, he leaned in. Not toward my mouth. No. His forehead came close, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him, but not touching me yet. Close enough that I could smell something on his skin. Maybe laundry detergent, maybe aftershave, or maybe just him. And it wasn't a kiss. It was something more dangerous. It was waiting for one. I could feel his breath. And I could feel my pulse in places I hadn't felt it in years. Behind my ears. At the base of my throat. Low in my belly. I closed my eyes. Just for a second. Just long enough to imagine what would happen if I didn't stop this. If I leaned forward 1 inch. If I tilted my head. If I allowed myself to shatter in the smallest, most beautiful way. But I didn't. Not yet. I opened my eyes again. And whispered, barely loud enough for the space between us. You don't understand what this would mean. It wasn't a plea. Or a warning. It was something else. It was me, standing on the edge of the kind of choice that changes you. He didn't move. He didn't touch more than my wrist. But his voice, low, steady, honest. I understand how you look at me. I stopped breathing altogether. Because that was the truth I hadn't meant to leave unguarded. That was the thing I thought I'd hidden behind polite conversation and maternal smiles and the soft cardigan I kept pulling tighter like armor. I had looked at him. More than once. In the hallway when he smiled too easily. In the kitchen when he dried the plates without being asked. In the garden when the moonlight caught the angle of his jaw and I realized how much time had passed without someone making me feel like that. I had looked. And he had seen. And now we were here. Balanced on that impossible pause, the breath before the storm, the second before glass shatters. He hadn't kissed me. But we were both already gone. There's a kind of silence that doesn't invite comfort. It invites confession. And we were both drowning in it, waiting to see who would speak first, or move first, or break. And somehow, even though the air between us hadn't changed temperature, I was sweating. Not from nerves. From the heat of being wanted. Not for what I do. Not for what I give. Not even for what I mean to others. But for who I am when no one else is watching. And Liam, he saw that version of me. And he didn't flinch. He stayed. Still. Close enough that I could feel every question rising in my throat like smoke, but none of them had answers. Just this moment. Still poised. Still suspended. Still waiting. I stepped away. Not because I was rejecting him. But because I needed space to survive what was happening inside me. My feet moved across the room, barely touching the floor, it felt like, but everything else inside me was crashing. Loudly. Completely. I stopped at the far window, my back to him. And I realized my hands were shaking. Not out of fear. Not out of shame. But from the sheer force of a world I had built, meticulously, carefully, every routine and every quiet evening, suddenly, rupturing. I wrapped my arms around myself, held on like that might hold back everything rising in me. And then, out loud, to the air, maybe to him, I said, I was never supposed to feel this way again. My voice cracked. I swallowed hard. I built an entire life to keep these feelings out. I made sure of it. Every choice. Every step. All of it was so I wouldn't have to feel this again. I didn't mean for my voice to sound so naked, but it did, like it had peeled itself open without my permission. And Liam, he didn't try to fix it. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer some young, poetic line to soften the weight of what I'd just said. He just stepped closer. One step, then another, until I could feel his presence behind me. Then, a hand. Soft, warm, on my shoulder. Not pulling, not pushing. Just there. Like an anchor. A reminder that I wasn't alone in the room, or in this moment. His touch didn't feel like permission. It felt like understanding. And, for the first time that night, I let myself lean. back, into him. I turned slowly, without speaking, without planning it, and rested my head against his chest. I could hear his heartbeat, steady, young, human. And then mine. Unsteady, fast, awake. And we didn't move. I didn't know how long we stood there. Time didn't feel linear anymore. It bent in that moment, curled around us like a protective wing. No clock, no rolls, no logic, just stillness. And within that stillness, something shifted inside me. Not a decision. Not yet, but a soft surrender. Not to him, not even to desire, but to the fact that I was still capable of feeling something this real. After years of quiet dinners and unspoken loneliness, I could still be startled by my own heart, still be moved, still be wanted, still be seen. I hadn't been held like that in years, not held to be comforted, or held because a photo needed taking, not held out of duty, but held because someone chose to be there, steady and silent, while I broke just a little. Liam didn't ask me to explain. He didn't try to lead this somewhere. He just stood there, letting me rest against him, as if that was the only thing that mattered right then. And in that stillness, I felt it, the ache soften, the panic dissolve, the shame uncoil, and in its place was something quieter, gentler, not peace, but maybe the beginning of it. It's strange what you remember. Not words, not decisions, but moments like this, where the world slows down, where you're allowed to just be in someone's presence. And for a woman who had spent decades proving herself useful, dependable, loyal, needed, this was the first time in a long time I felt like I didn't have to do anything. I could just exist. And still be wanted. Still be worth holding. Even if just for that one impossible moment. And that was enough to undo everything I thought I knew. The house was silent again. Not quiet silent. The kind of stillness that presses against your skin like linen left out in the cold. I was back in that same kitchen chair. The one I'd been in earlier, when the storm still hummed outside and the wine sat forgotten beside my trembling fingertips. Now, the glass was empty. The storm had passed. And the only sound was the soft, steady flap of the curtain as the wind pushed it inward, then pulled it away again. Like breath. My husband was asleep upstairs. Lights off. Phone on his nightstand. His side of the bed turned toward the wall, like it always was. My son was gone, off chasing something bigger than this town, than this kitchen, than this life we gave him. And I sat there. Alone. But not lonely. Not in the way I had been. I remember running my fingers along the grain of the table, this old, worn wood that had heard every version of my voice. Mother. Wife. Friend. Hostess. Peacemaker. Ghost. And now, something else entirely. I wasn't crying. I didn't feel regret clawing at me. I didn't feel giddy or reckless either. I just felt present. And that surprised me. There's a strange peace that comes after the emotional earthquake. When everything's still standing, but nothing feels arranged the same. My chest felt looser. My thoughts didn't swirl in shame. I wasn't thinking about Liam, not in the way people might expect. I wasn't picturing him, or what he meant, or what came next. I was thinking about me. About how long it had been since I looked at myself, really looked, and saw something alive there. Not useful. Not loyal. Not reliable. But alive. Desire doesn't die with age. It doesn't vanish when the kids leave or when you've been with the same person for so long that silence becomes your native tongue. It doesn't leave you because your skin changes or your priorities shift. Desire just hides. It curls itself into the corners of your daily life, behind grocery lists and dryer lint and dinner prep and I'm fines. It tucks itself behind the steady rhythm of being needed by everyone except yourself. And after a while, you stop asking where it went. You just learn to live without it. Until one day, without warning, it stirs. Sometimes quietly. Sometimes in the shape of someone's gaze. Sometimes in the accidental brush of a wrist or a question asked too softly. But when it wakes up, it doesn't scream. It whispers. You're still here. That's what Liam gave me. Not a grand affair. Not promises or declarations. Just reminder that someone was willing to look at me and see. Really see. The woman buried beneath the weight of decades. The one I'd almost forgotten. I don't know if I'll ever see him again. I don't need to. That night wasn't about beginning something. It was about remembering. And sometimes, remembering is enough. I sat in that chair until the first blue light of morning started brushing the sky. Then I got up, washed the glass, turned out the light, and went upstairs to the bed where my husband lay, breathing steady in the dark. I slipped beneath the covers. Not pretending. Not apologizing. Just knowing that a part of me had come back to life. And no one, not even me, had expected that. If you've ever looked at your life and wondered where you went inside it, if you've ever felt desire stirring where it shouldn't, but also where it needed to, then maybe this story found you for a reason. And maybe you're not as lost as you think. Thanks for being here. This has been Passionate Tales Unfold. Not every touch is about passion. Sometimes it's about being reminded you're still here, still breathing, still wanting, still worthy of being seen. Did you feel that? The way silence held us, like a secret only two people shared? What did you feel in that moment? Did it unsettle you, stir something quiet and unexpected inside? Or did it make you feel seen, like maybe, just maybe, you weren't invisible after all? I don't have the answers. I only have the questions that linger long after the story ends. If this story touched something in you, if it whispered to the part of you that's been waiting, let it rest here in the comments. Share what you're feeling, or simply hold the silence alongside me. Because none of us are alone in our wanting. None of us are alone in the fragile, messy spaces between what's right and what makes us feel alive. Thank you for being with me, right here, right now on Passionate Tales Unfold. Until next time, take care of that quiet part inside you. It's worth holding on to.